So I want to be able to speak a little bit about our program today. So good afternoon. It's a very good afternoon. Looking at all these people sitting at the table here, this is wonderful. It's wonderful to have us back. So congratulations. So in all of you in this room and other people who are now going to be virtually watching this, I am very proud to announce that I can talk about the speakers today. My name is Jeannie Walker. I'm a Town and Gown First Vice President and Program Chair. And I've been a member of this organization for quite a while. But as Paula said before, we're going to be 4 years, I guess, at this time. So that's quite amazing. Town and Gown offers peeks into the academic life of a university and the support of a community, members who share the same goals as what we want for our students, and especially in providing scholarships for deserving students such as Bianca here. So thank you for your interest in being here. Thank you for coming, your presence, your generosity. In my role this year, I had the honor of inviting many people to talk about certain programs. And interviewed faculty, administrators, interviewed guests to share a variety of topics. I really hope that you will remember that all 5 of these programs over this year of 2021, I think all of them are going to be very enlightening. But today, we begin with what I think is I'm just pleased with this presentation this year. I'm going to introduce to you 2 different people that I want you to get to know. One is a well-known Chapman media relations star, and the other is a founder of the Hilbert Museum. That is amazing to me, to have 2 of these different people be able to share with you what this Hilbert Museum is all about. So I first want to talk about Mary Platt. Mary was a public relations specialist, still is, and I actually worked for 2 years at the center, the Getty Center at the museum for about 2 years in the early 2000s. And then in 2004, she became the director here at Chapman of Communication and Media Relations. Her many writings over those 12 years all about the goings-on at Chapman were everywhere. We used to get information about just about everything. They talked about exhibits, they talked about academics, new buildings, theater, anything that the program was going to talk about, you'd hear it from Mary. Over the years here, she also wrote a book about 150 years of Chapman history, which I think is amazing. And she wrote a book about exhibits and art collections at this university. When the Hilbert Museum opened on the Chapman campus, it was quite a perfect fit for Mary, I think. For in 2017, she became the director of the Hilbert Museum of California Art. With her expertise in art and her museums and as a curator and all of her public relations, I think you are going to hear some remarkable knowledge from her when she brings to the Hilbert Museum. Mark Hilbert, the founder of the Hilbert Museum, grew up in Pasadena, California, graduated in a program in engineering at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and went on to enjoy 2 or more decades, I'm not quite sure, as an engineer in the business of air conditioning. I read online that actually he produced a new product to help consume energy conservation, which I think is great. He was also interested in residential properties in the area, and he also has a successful property management company. Well, okay, but the story you're going to hear today is really unique. How in the world did Mark Hilbert gravitate from an engineer in air conditioning and property management to founding a museum of California art? So to me, it means kind of looking at, okay, engineering meets art. This is what you're going to be hearing. You must have heard recently that the Hilbert Museum has been voted, I think it's from the LA Times, Best of the Southlands, as one of the cultural jewels of this area, which I think is amazing. His remarkable story is really one that we wish to all find, I think, in later years, to open new horizons and new knowledge. So listen to his story, including how it all started, thoughts for the future of the Hilbert Museum, and you might hear something about an amazing beach scene someday. If he tells you. If he doesn't, ask. So let's begin the story with these two individuals. Welcome Mark Hilbert and Mary Platt. We're also pleased to have Mark's wife, Jan, come up to the stage as well.
Yeah, so I'm going to let them take the stage first, and I'm just going to run the slideshow for a little bit.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for inviting us both here. My lovely wife, Jan, who's been my partner all along through this whole process. And the thing is, opening an art museum is not quite like mushrooms coming out of the ground, because it doesn't work that way. There's a lengthy process that happens. And I'm going to kind of share that with you because, we never set out to open up an art museum, but it just happened. And the fact is that my wife was the first art collector because she was buying things a long time before we even met. So it's funny how that works. She wants to sit down. Thank you.
I'd love to talk, but I understand we're on Zoom, so there's not enough time. Next time.
So, how did it all start? So, about 30 years ago, my wife and I decided to open up buy a house out in Springs. And so we went, we looked at our account, and after you close escrow, it's always empty. So we went to a consignment shop to try to figure out, how we could get some furnishings and art and so forth to put on walls. So we got there, and there was a wall of these paintings, and on the wall was a particular watercolor that we both liked. So we bought it, we took it home, and really enjoyed looking at it. And we went back, and the gallerist of the gallery showed us a book called the California Style Book. And the California Style Book is a book of California scene painting. Well, what is a California scene painting? Well, it's really everyday life in California. And of course, having grown up here, I could really relate to the artwork. And so I said, this is what I'd like to collect. And so we did. 30 years we collected the artwork. And then something funny happened. Museums started calling us up and asking us if they could bring tours to our house. So that was kind of an honor, and kind of enjoyed showing people through the house. And so in fact, I learned that I don't have to show every single painting in the house. So then the next thing that happened is we started lending work to museums. And in fact, we've been asked to send work as far away as Germany. All things. So it was quite a nice experience. So about this time, I went on the board of an art museum in Pasadena, and I got a chance to learn about how museums work, how they actually work. And I learned some of the things that you ought to do and some of the things that perhaps you should. One of those things that I did learn is that it's really important to have a strong mission statement. they have the vision, exactly what you're going to be as a museum. And, I think being around that proved valuable. So, we became acquainted with a gallerist. And this gallerist said, if you want to put together an important art collection, you've got to try to do two things. Pick on a theme, a focus. Don't buy a little of this, or a little of that, or a little of the other, because what ends up happening, you'll end up with a hodgepodge of art. So that was number one. Number two thing he said is go to all the great art museums in this country and in Europe and study them. So that's what we've done. We've gone to Europe 25 times. We've been to several hundred art museums. And my wife came up with a game for us. So at every gallery that we went to, she would pick out her favorite and I'd pick out mine. And then we talked about, well, why did you like this one? Why did you like that one? And that's how we kind of learned about the different schools. We looked at the Dutch school, the Impressionist school, the Italian schools, Rome and Florence. So we had a really great opportunity to look at the world's greatest paintings, and sometimes 2 or 3 times over. So that trained our eyes on quality. Well, it just so happens that in California, there was a thing called the movie studios, which were hiring thousands of artists from all over the world to do set design or paint backdrops or animation or movie posters. And so we found that they left behind a treasure trove of artwork because they were not only working in the studios, but they were also doing fine art on weekend or on holiday vacations. So there we are. We were thrust into this huge amount of artwork, which we bought over the years. But the other thing that happened is the computer collecting for, should I say, having a computer program that you could program the artist that you would like to see at auction is a huge advantage. So we could find out paintings, like if we were collecting Miller Sheets paintings, we could know about every auction that goes on in the world that feature Miller Sheets. And so we could buy, just online. So it's a huge advantage for a collector. So we put together this collection and we're loaning it out. Then one day I went into Los Angeles and I went to an art museum by the name of Chapman. And I went into the first gallery and I was actually shocked. It was such a disgusting display that I just couldn't get out of that gallery fast enough, and I went downstairs to the next gallery. And guess what? That was even worse. So I turned around, I went to the elevator, and I couldn't get out of that museum fast enough. So I'm driving home, and I'm thinking to myself, well, what can I do? What can I do? And I just posed that question to myself all the way home. But by the time I got home, I walked in the house, I said to my wife, I'd like to open up an art museum. Crazy idea. I don't recommend it. But that's what we did. My lovely wife supported me in this new journey. So it was several years, really, that time took its course. I'm thinking about where are we going to open this up? And I realized that my name is not J. Paul Getty. Open up an art museum. You have to say there's something bigger and better than you. And so one morning, I got to the office, and all of a sudden the bulb went on. My nephew had taken me to the main campus at Chapman the year before, and all of a sudden, what about Chapman? So I went online, I did some research, and I found out a They did not have an art museum, a gallery, not an art museum. And B, that they were the fastest growing private university in the West. So I picked up the phone, it was really an impulsive thing. I picked up the phone and I called Cheryl's office. And I said, every great university needs an art museum. Well, it wasn't too long, as you can expect, after that call. I'm sure they thought, who's this crazy guy? Usually we're calling people. And so before long, Cheryl and Jim Doty, and my wife, and myself are cruising around in this little cart, looking at various pieces of real estate. Where are we going to put this on the campus? Well, we ended up at the last stop. Guess what? The last stop was across the street from the train station. And I thought, that just is great. That's just where we're going to go, because we could just have them coming off the train and go across the street. They take the train from Riverside, from Los Angeles. I'm up for this. And so that's kind of how it happened. So now the museum has been open for 5 years. I didn't know how this was going to turn out. To be honest with you, it was a big risk. It's like jumping off a cliff. You don't know how it's going to resonate. But as it turns out, we garnered just about all of the awards that you could possibly get. But the thing that happened that I wasn't really expecting is the amount of joy that brings me when I go to the museum. I take people on a tour, and they love what they see. They say, "Oh, Mr. Hilbert, thank you so much for doing this. We just love your museum." I hear that 4 or 5 times every time at the museum. In fact, 2 weeks ago, I had this lady turn around and she says, "Oh, you're Mr. Hilbert." And she gave me a big bear hug. She says, "I'm an artist. I love this museum." And that was, I can't tell you, that's something that money can't buy. It's just a wonderful experience, the joy of enriching people's lives. Now, our museum is different than any of the other museums out there, really, is that are focused on California, everyday life in California. But our museum tells stories. It tells stories of Californians going about their daily life. And people can relate to the paintings that we have. You're not looking at something with a white canvas and maybe a red blob in the center. You're looking at something that when you look at it, you know exactly what it is, like a landscape or a portrait. And so that really sets us apart from some of the other museums. So look at my time here. I think my time is about running out. But I want to thank you all for being here. And how many have you been to the museum? Oh, goodness. That's a surprise. Well, that's very exciting. So we look forward to having you again soon. Thank you.
So thank you, Mark. That was amazing. I tell our tour groups every time, Mark, every Thursday at 11 a.m., he comes over to the museum and he leads these tours. And it's like, where else can you possibly go that the founder of the museum? Then you'd be like Dave Paul Getty, like leading a tour of the Getty Museum. It's really unique, and that's part of what makes us, I think, we try to think of ourselves as, we're a narrative museum, we're a storytelling museum, and stories that relate to all people. And that's, Mark got into somewhat of what California scene painting, which is what we call the genre that we focus on at the Hilbert Museum. But what it is, so I'm just going to walk you through some of our most popular paintings and tell you the little stories behind them in the time that we have left. This one, to me, you may recognize it. It's up mostly it's up on our walls. It's not, it doesn't have to be up right now, but it will be coming back. Millard Sheets, of course, is kind of known as the dean of California artists. He could do everything from oil paintings to these beautiful watercolors to mosaics. And we'll see a mosaic of his coming up. But this was this is a piece called San Dimas Train Station, and to me it's kind of like the epitome of California scene painting. Might look a little gloomy to you, but I think there's more to it. It is, first of all, it's a watercolor, and it's, if you see this thing in person, you cannot believe that it's a watercolor. How many of you guys have tried to do watercolors or do watercolors? Okay, so you know how finicky they are, right? So, when you look at this, it was done with a very dry brush, and there's so much detail in it. And the fact that he was able to create those illuminations, the two lights, and all that is it's an application of white paint, but also gradations of the color to an almost magical effect. Whenever I look at this painting, it's from 1933, so we're in the Great Depression, and it's got these two figures of men, and we don't know if they're waiting to get on the train, or if they're waiting for somebody to get off the train. The train is not there yet, so we're in kind of a liminal space in between. There's an aura of expectation with this painting. I think it's really wonderful. Here's another fun one. This is called The Right Spot by Joseph Fry, and it, again, from the 1930s, so we're still in the Great Depression. This was a little roadside stand that was up near Pasadena. And the story goes, Mark told me the story, and I had to go look it up just to make sure that it wasn't just an urban legend, because Mark would never tell me urban legends, right? But he told me that this was where the cheeseburger was invented. Okay, and you know what? I looked up cheeseburger on Wikipedia, which is an immaculate source. Sure enough, it was invented at this little roadside stand called The Right Spot. So I love this painting because there's so much detail in it. I mean, I had to look up, it says, drink the new Kofan, you'll like it. I had to look up Kofan. It's like, what is that? It was a soda. Back in the day, it kind of had this sort of Asian flair to it, maybe a little spicy. But it was one of those like weird soda brands that just came and went. Of course, we still have Arrowhead. I don't know if we have Arrowhead and ginger ale. But yeah, there's so much detail here, and it's just, it tells of a time and a place, and that's what our paintings do. They take you back to, so many people talk to us and say, I remember that place, or when I was growing up, or my dad told me about that place. So this is a wonderful, California scene painting can also be portraits. This is a wonderful painting of a woman artist named Burr Singer. And she was a habitué of the jazz clubs on Central Avenue in Los Angeles. For those of you who know, LA was quite a center for jazz in the 1940s, and Central Avenue was like the beating heart of it all. And so she was not African American, she was a Jewish lady, but she loved these clubs, and she painted the denizens of the clubs. And this is this young woman putting her makeup on. It's just such a striking painting with that circular red hat, and then her big ruff, her lace ruff. And the people, you can see in the background the band and the people dancing. It's terrific. Now, Emil Cosa Jr. is a good example of an artist who came to California because of the movie industry. So that's that tie-in that we have that makes us absolutely unique in the world, is these artists who came from all over the world in the 1930s and 40s, when it was hard to, get work as an artist and sell your art. People had other problems. But the movie industry was hiring artists. They were hiring hundreds of artists. Of course, Walt Disney was a huge employer of artists, but also the other studios. So Emil Cosa Jr. went to work for 20th Century Fox. worked his way up to, he was the lead art director by the 1950s and 60s. And in the early 1960s, he won an Oscar for his art direction on the movie Cleopatra with Elizabeth Taylor. So he's an Oscar winner. Some of his works that you might know from the movies are the 20th Century Fox Searchlight logo. He created that. And also the scene at the end of the original Planet of the Apes, when Charlton Heston is on the beach and realizes that the Statue of Liberty is poking up out of the sand and screams, "Ah!" as only Charlton Heston can. That is a matte painting by Emil Kosa Jr. So anyway, this is a painting he did in the 50s called Cloverleaf Confusion. It's the floor-level freeway in Los Angeles, which was such an icon of freeway design in that time. People were, coming from all over the world to look at it. And of course, there is the LA City Hall being the tallest building in LA at the time, not anymore. Wayne Lacombe, he's showing Santa Monica Palisades in the 1960s. So I'm just going to go through these quickly because we don't have a whole lot of time. Jack Laycox, I was telling you about the difficulty of watercolors, and he was a master. He was the master of the color black in watercolors. He did a lot of these night scenes. And you watercolorists out there, if you've ever used black, you know how tricky it is. It will bleed into everything. But he knew how to use it. And this is just a spectacular watercolor of the Chinese New Year celebration in San Francisco. Roger Kuntz, here we're local here with the end of Newport Pier. Very beautifully done, kind of concentrating on the angles and the architecture of the pier. And this guy, Paul Henry or Henri, he was a character. He was a forger, believe it or not. He actually got thrown in jail at least once for forging art and selling it. He was also a very good artist on his own, because most forgers are pretty good. I mean, you have to be good. It's like, why do you go to the dark side? But they do, some of them. But this is a wonderful, very textural. It's hard to get across how textural this is in a slide, but the paint's very heavily laid on, and just a beautiful scene of Avalon. This one hangs in my office, proudly. I love it. First, I love the cat because I'm a cat person, but it's just kind of my little window onto the ocean. And this is an artist named Robert Frame, who was very active around Santa Barbara in the 70s. And he had sort of a thing for doing these interior scenes looking out through a window. And that was many of his pieces kind of revolve around that theme. So it's just a very pleasant, it's my window on the ocean. Rex Brand, here's another watercolor, Wilshire Boulevard. Take out that little swoop of the jet contrail up there, and you'll see that it's a much lesser painting. So all these elements work together. They're all very important. These guys were masters, and women. Okay, Vanessa Helder, this is a scene, anybody remember rural delivery routes? They live on one? Yeah, so they would group the mailboxes together out in the country, like all at the end of the road, and then you had to hike, half a mile to get your mail every day. So she's portraying that in a very accomplished, again, really dry brush watercolor. Our friend, this is a living artist, Wong Yangcharian. He came to us from Thailand, moved to LA in the 70s, and he loves California. And he drives all over. He's done, Mark owns many of his works. He loves Los Angeles, but this is in Livingston. And he did a whole series of these they look like they're abandoned theaters, but it could just be also the time of day. He paints it high, when the sun is shining brightly and everybody's inside, and there might be one or two guys walking around, and he loves putting these old trucks and cars in. He says oftentimes they're not actually in he just puts them in. So, and then here's our friend, another living artist. So we champion living artists that are working in the California narrative art tradition. So here's our friend Bradford Salomon, and there's Mark over on the other side. And this is a piece that Mark has purchased for the newly expanded museum called Holly. It's done actually on paper, and it's many like sheets of paper that are fit together on the wall. And so he's kind of playing with ideas of ephemeral materials. Very striking. Another living artist, Cynthia Sitton, she's from the Laguna College of Art and Design. And this is kind of reminiscent of our times, right? She's very, I think, fearful or trepidatious about something, and that very creepy wallpaper behind her just adds to it. So not all of our paintings are happy, snappy. Some are thoughtful and
Happy snappy.
So right now we have a wonderful exhibition up on the artist Henrietta Burke. She lived from 1919 to 1990, and she was very popular. She was highly collected, a member of the Bay Area figural movement in the 50s and 60s. A lot of Hollywood stars collected her. Julie Andrews has a big collection. Who do these people look like to you? Yeah, right? They look like the Kennedys, Jackie and John Kennedy. And we think they probably are, because the timing of this is right. And she did know a lot of celebrities, so it's entirely possible. So this is kind of the lead painting in our show, and this belongs to the Hilbert collection. She's a wonderful painter, and you need to come see her. Ernie Barnes Jr. was an African-American artist who was a NFL football player, but he did paintings on the side, and really good paintings, and they really tell the story. He sort of concentrated on sports. There's a lot of great sports paintings by him, but he also was kind of a Hollywood sort of insider, and so he'd paint like behind the scenes. This is behind the scenes at a movie studio. All the little characters, there's some hanky-panky going on. So they're often, his paintings are quite comical in a way. And then you get the pure, almost abstractionist, like Bieberman, playing on these forms of the LA freeways as being very sculptural, graceful, and almost abstract in a way. Fletcher Martin, very influenced by the Mexican muralists, and you can kind of see that in his work if you know the work of Siqueiros and Orozco. And the other Mexican muralists, he picked up on a lot of their, I think he was actually an assistant to Siqueiros for a while. This is just called Bucolic, a couple looking very thoughtful out in the country. This guy, I love this guy. This is a gift from Jim Doney to the museum. Irv Weiner, again, the crossover between movies and art. Irv worked for Warner Brothers. He was an animation background artist for a lot of the Warner Brothers Looney Tunes. But in his spare time, he painted these creepy little farm scenes. And they are, I mean, when you look at them, they're cool. I mean, they're very detailed, but there's always something weird about them. And that kind of speaks, I think, to the very sort of mentality, I called it subversive the other day, and Mark thought that was a little strange, but it is kind of subversive, the Warner Brothers artists, they were kind of reacting against what Disney was doing with the fairy tales, and they were more stretchy and wacky. And so here you've got this farm, but you've got that on the right-hand side, you've got that weird sort of straight shadow, like there's a skyscraper or something. And why? I don't know, but it's there, and it's like, what is looming over there? We love this one on the left-hand side. This is a painter working in LA right now, Danny Galeote. It's called Freedom of Speech. And what it is, he did a whole series of these large-scale paintings based on Norman Rockwell's Four Freedoms that came out in the 1940s. And so Danny is updating the Four Freedoms for our times with this very powerful painting of the gentleman speaking out at a public meeting. He's got his copy of the U.S. Constitution under his arm. The original one, he's got it, stuffed in his pocket. But he's really, Danny is making it a more diverse audience here, and but still emphasizing the importance of this most important freedom that we have. This might look a little European to you. Misha Ashkenazi, he was from Russia, and it's Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles in the 1920s on a rainy day. So, giving a whole different look at our Los Angeles. Gene Francis doing, they're not all images of California. They sometimes paint outside California. This is of the Grand Canyon. It was done last year, but it actually takes us back to the 1920s. He loves doing that. He paints historical paintings. So the motorcycle and all the outfits are from around 1928 or so, I'm thinking. Anyway, how am I doing on time, guys?
Got a little more time.
Okay, because I want to give due diligence to the expansion of the museum here. So I'll talk about a few more. This one, again, is, I think, a quintessential California scene painting. This is by Miller. It's called If I Had the Wings of an Angel. Does anybody know that tune? This was a tune, a folk tune in America. If I had the wings of an angel over these prison walls, I would fly. So it talks about a prisoner wanting to escape. And it's an interesting choice for a painting about, at first glance, looks to be about a carousel and people having fun. But then you look at what's going on in the foreground. So over on the left-hand side, you've got the gentleman, he looks like a streetcar conductor, looking down at his watch. Our students always think it's a cell phone. Of course. Some things never change, but he's looking at his watch, and finishing his coffee so he can run back to his job. But then you've got the couple on the other side, and she looks like she's comforting him, and he looks very devastated about something. And Miller never really explains. He leaves it up to you to figure out the story. When we have Chapman classes at the museum, English classes come in to write stories and poems about our paintings. This is a favorite one for them too, because there's all kinds of stories that you can come up with. So, he might have lost a job, he might be looking for a job and he can't find one, and they might be a young married couple. So there's an aura of melancholy about this one, and added to by that title. And then we've got pure landscapes, not quite pure because there are people in this landscape. If you look closely, there's the cowboy driving the horses towards the little ranch in the background. But this is just an absolutely beautiful painting by Ralph Hewlett, who worked for Disney all the way from Snow White in the 1920s, 30s, thank you, to The Jungle Book in 67. So in other words, he worked on every movie that Walt himself worked on. And he was a longtime Disney artist, but in his spare time, he was out and about in California painting these beautiful scenes. He did a wonderful series of paintings of the Bunker Hill area in Los Angeles as well. And then, In-N-Out Fries, and that's our friend Bradford again, the work of the holly on the many pieces of paper. But we have the hamburger that goes with this. And of course, sometimes kids come in and have a little fun with it. And so there are basically several prongs to what we do at the Hilbert Museum. We have the fine art aspect. We have the animation art or movie production art, and then we have illustration art. So I'm just going to show you a couple selections from those. And there's always something new. So every 3 to 4 months, we rotate some exhibition there. So there's always something new. So when you come back, you will probably be able to see something new every time. So here's the great Mary Blair concept painting for Disney's Cinderella. Mark's got, I think, one of the great collections of Mary Blair in working on this animation book, and it's an amazing collection of probably one of the most important Disney artists of all time. And there's another piece by her from Cinderella. They were so just imaginative and colorful, and her use of color was like nobody else. And then We've got a nice collection of concept art for Nightmare Before Christmas, a little more recently. This is a beautiful piece of concept art for Sleeping Beauty by the great Ivan Earl, probably the second most famous Disney artist of all time. And showing how he, used these elongated sort of Gothic looking figures. And then, of course, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which is a very successful show. And this one actually doesn't belong to us, but it's an example of us borrowing from other collectors and other museums sometimes. So, we can keep that going and those good partnerships. American Illustration, the only place where we kind of go off the California theme, because the illustration industry was based mostly in New York. But this is our Norman Rockwell, probably the most famous American illustrator of all. This is a beautiful preparatory drawing in pencil for a Saturday Evening Post cover in 1946. And it shows people just rushing into this train station. They're buying newspapers from the little newsboy as they go in, and then you see everybody on the platform reading their papers. My newspaper friends love this. And, people, and there's all kinds of stories going on here. There's the little figure over on the left-hand side that's kind of rushing. He's behind the fence with a little bowler hat on. Does that look like anybody famous to you? Looks kind of like, we think it might be Hitchcock. And as far as we know, Rockwell knew him. And so he might have been like making a little cameo appearance. And then we've got a lot of beautiful illustrations like this from magazine stories and books and advertisements from the mid-20th century. So definitely don't miss our illustration gallery. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Hilbert Museum expansion now. So you guys are privileged because we have been talking over all during COVID. We've been meeting with architects and getting these plans ready. So the museum is going to be expanding. You may have heard, starting this coming May. We're going to shut down for a little while. We're looking for a place to move to. So if anybody knows a place around Orange that we could move to, give me a call. But we'll be closed down for a year, and when we come back, we're going to be expanded into this beautiful new space. So we're taking over the the Partridge Dance Center next door to us. And here is the footprint. So you can see on the right-hand side, the south building, which is our current building. And the north building is the current Partridge Dance Center. In between, there's going to be a beautiful events courtyard that can probably accommodate up to 300 or so people for dinners and receptions and other events out there. We can do movie screenings out there. We can do concerts. And then, of course, we're keeping our current south building that has the wonderful acoustics. And we're adding a multi-purpose room in the north building for lectures and other things like that as well. So there's the possibility for having multiple events going on at the same time. We really want this. Here's an aerial view. Now don't put your cell phones away. We don't want this getting out because these are highly conceptual renderings, okay? And it could change. But the concept is that the two buildings will be joined by this sort of floating rectangle, which is going to be over the top of that open courtyard in between. So can you see that where it says Hilbert Museum? And it kind of projects over towards, so what I'm doing here with this, we're standing on top of rubies, like up above, looking over. So we're kind of looking east and north here. And you see the well, sort of the light wells that go down. That's a new structure as well. Here is looking straight on at the west-facing facade of the Hilbert. So you're looking at the floating rectangle, and you're looking directly into the courtyard here. So what is that beautiful, colorful thing on the front? That is a Millard Sheets mosaic. 40-foot long Italian glass tile mosaic that was given to us by the owners of a building that used to be a home savings in Santa Monica. And so that was a gift from them to us. And we are very happy to preserve this wonderful piece. You might know that Millard Sheets in his workshop worked on more than 60 home savings banks all over California and in several other states, and designed murals, mosaics, sculptural programs under the direction of Howard Amundsen Sr., who took a great interest in the art that people would see coming into his home savings buildings. This is a more close-up of that beautiful mosaic. The line across, I could not find a good example of it without that line. That's a piece of tape that's holding it as they take it down from the original building. But you can get an idea of it. It's called Pleasures Along the Beach. It's made up of thousands of tiny pieces of glass tile, including silver and gold. And so when this is facing the setting sun, so when it catches that setting sun, it's just going to come alive. So we are so proud that we could, participated in saving this wonderful piece of California art. A lot of the home savings buildings are threatened right now. And, sometimes, unfortunately, if they can't get someone to step in and take it, where does that art go? Sometimes it just gets trashed. I know, it's terrible. So at least we saved this one, and it's going to be here for posterity. Here's another look from, I'm standing kind of kitty corner at Ruby's, looking over. You can see some of the sculptures that came with the mosaic. So we took the whole program. We took the sculptures as well. They're not by Millard Sheets, they're by other artists. This is looking directly into that courtyard, which I think is going to become like kind of an outdoor living room for our community. In a way, there's going to be, I'm excited because there's going to be a cafe. So I said at the beginning of this, I said, we live in a coffee desert over there. Yes, we could hop in our cars and go to Starbucks, but, wouldn't it be nice to have coffee other than Ruby's? Ruby's is great. And this is just looking the other way. So now we're in the courtyard looking over. So we're looking west towards Ruby's outside that box. And so you can see the cafe over on the left. And that tree that is going to be there is going to look just like that. It's going to be an actual California live oak. And that is it, you guys. So you got the first. I would invite you to come to the Hilbert Museum. When I look out at this group here, I see not only a physically beautiful audience, but I see prospective docents. So please give us a call and come and see us. Thank you so much. So who has a question? Anybody? About the museum or the art or, yes?
For Mr. Hilbert, do people call you and recommend things now that you should buy or tell you about things that are available?
All the time. Do I have a target?
He's on speed dial. He's on speed dial for a lot of dealers.
How many pieces are in your collection and how many do you acquire on an annual basis?
Well, I wish my wife weren't here. But, I would have to say we're just a little under 3,000 paintings. Different show. We can do a different show. Every year, I mean, for 30 years, and never repeat ourselves. Just under 3,000.
Hi, yes.
You mentioned you and your wife would You mentioned you and your wife would find your favorite pieces at the museums you went to. I was wondering if both of you now have favorite pieces at this museum.
Favorite pieces where?
Here it
If you have favorite pieces at the Hilbert.
Oh, well, yeah, that's a tough one. I'd have to say that it changes daily.
They're all kind of like our babies in a way, so it's hard to pick just one. Anybody else have a question? Yes.
Is there any piece that you're longing after that you're?
Always. many do we buy a year? I would guess we probably have maybe 100 paintings a year. I like to listen to what people like, and it kind of helps guide me as to what kind of things that we should be adding to the museum. But our job is really to have variety. We want to have something for everybody. Part of the reason that we have the animation collection is that young people are very attracted to that, and we want to bring in the young people as best we can. So people tell me all the time, I love the variety of work that we see here.
I would suggest marine life as a theme for another section.
Marine life?
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for a wonderful presentation, both of you. Mary, your historical research is outstanding. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, and please, when you come to visit us, find me, find Mark if he's there, and, give us your feedback. We love it. We have a little guest book in the front where you can write maybe some ideas, because we always like to, this is a museum for you, for everybody in our community. And so we want it to be reflecting what you guys like. So far, you've liked it, so. Thank you so much, you guys. So,
Wasn't this remarkable?
Yeah.
My pleasure to give certificates to both Mark Hilbert and to Mary Platt. And this certifies that because you had done speaking here and talked to us and really educated us for so many good ideas about the Hilbert Museum, we want you to know that a $300 contribution to the Chapman Fund is being made for both of you.
Oh, awesome.